Welcome to the Republic Brothers Podcast. We're cutting through the noise, defending the truth. I'm Mike, joined by my brother Matt, and we break down the issues that matter most to conservatives. Today we're talking about the latest on Israel, the government shutdown, and a little bit of Charlie Kirk. Now before we get started, I have a little story to share and a quick shout out. So, Matthew, as you know, wife and kids, we all took a little family trip this weekend to see our old neighbors and our friends. On the way home from this trip, we're kind of not rushing back, but we're trying to hurry and get home today so that we can record tonight. We didn't want to get home too late with the kids because they have school tomorrow. And we pull over at this gas station. We're at this gas station. I pump some gas. She comes back out or takes the girls to the bathroom, comes back out. We get back on the road. We get about 20 minutes down the road, and I turn around and say, "Hey, do you have my debit card?" She looked all over the van for it, trying to find it. Could not find it anywhere. I kept asking, "Oh, are you sure it's not in your back pocket? Is it up there in front of the seat? Is it on the floor over here?" She's like, "No, I don't know." So she calls the gas station. She left it on the counter at the gas station. And we're now 20 minutes down the road. So I had to turn around and drive 20 minutes back in the opposite direction to this gas station to get the debit card. I told her on the way back to the gas station that I was going to tell this story tonight on the podcast and give Jake and Linda a shout out so that when they hear this, they can message Candace and give her hell for having to make me turn around and getting us home about 40 minutes later than we should have been.
So that explains the 1 hour delay in us starting.
Well, we had that. Then we also ran into some pretty bad traffic. There was an accident coming through one of the bigger cities. We thought that it was just like, rush hour traffic, but there was a huge accident, so we had to get off the interstate and take some back roads. But yeah, so it was a nightmare. Finally, we're back. Everything's back to normal. This is our first time back recording in a week. We missed Sunday. We usually record Sundays and Wednesdays, so we missed out on Sunday. So we're back Wednesday, and we are ready to jump into things. So, like I said last time, I just wanted to give Jake and Linda a shout out. When you guys hear this, please do not let her forget that she almost left all of our money at a gas station. So now that we have story time out of the way, let's get into the rest of the podcast. Matt, tell us a little bit about the hostage release.
Yeah, Trump has returned home from a trip to Israel and Egypt where he celebrated the ceasefire he brokered between Israel and Hamas. This is the first phase of the release where the last 20 living captives have returned home in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian inmates, and the IDF has agreed to pull back to a agreed-upon line as part of that agreement. Now, there are still several deceased hostages in Gaza. They are working on bringing those individuals home. Some of that is these individuals passed a while ago, and they're trying to locate the remains of those individuals. The second part of that is members of Hamas have stated they will not disarm, despite that being a part of the agreement. Trump said he spoke to Hamas through emissaries and asked them if they were going to disarm, and they responded yes. Trump stated, quote, "That's what they told me. They will disarm or we will disarm them. Got it?" Now that kind of goes back to what I've said about dealing with terrorist organizations. They're not inclined to give up power. I don't know about you, Mike, but I kind of was not surprised to see some members of Hamas not wanting to give up the power.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about this before. We were a little skeptical that they would give up power.
There are still many things that have not been agreed upon, including stages of disarmament, who will create and control the peacekeeping forces in Gaza after Israel pulls out. Leadership of a transitional Gaza government is also still being negotiated. We have consistently spoken about this topic. I've kind of stayed on the "I'll believe it when I see it" train. Immediately after the IDF pulled back, Hamas used the opportunity to start launching attacks against rival militia leaders and people they deemed as collaborators to Israel's invasion of Gaza. That included Hamas publicly executing 8 men by firing squad. I struggle to see how you can negotiate with these people.
Yeah, I don't think there is any negotiation left at this point. I think they need to figure out what they can figure out with them and try to maybe have at least a little bit of structure to this whole thing. But at a certain point, I think we're going to need Trump to step in and say, all right, you've had plenty of chances, and now we're at the end of the road, and this is how it's going to be, yes or no. And if the answer is not yes, well, your actions have consequences.
I understand Israel giving this some time. Some of this isn't about the actual offensive on the ground for Israel. It's about public opinion and the opinion of other nations around the world.
Isn't it pretty much established, though, at this point, that Israel could squash Hamas like a bug at the snap of a finger if they wanted to?
I wish it were that easy, and if it was, they would have already done it. To all the people who say there's a genocide in Gaza, they're completely false. If the objective was simply to kill everybody, they'd have been done in a week. If you're not trying to kill the civilians, but you are trying to kill the people behind the civilians, it's a lot harder. All the aid that went into Gaza was controlled by Hamas, and they used a lot of it to build sophisticated networks of tunnels underground. Urban warfare is as tough as it comes. It's not like they're trying to run through fields. There's buildings everywhere where Hamas are able to set up booby traps.
Well, so is this something as simple as, obviously, we heard that Trump doesn't want to put American boots on the ground in that area, which I agree with. I don't think that any Americans should be over there. But at this point, I would like to see Israel get the green light to just go in and do whatever they need to do.
Well, if Hamas decide against disarmament, I do think it's likely the IDF is the one that would go in again to disarm them. There's a chance Trump would work with Middle Eastern countries, the Egyptians, the Qataris, the Saudis. There's a chance those nations would send forces in to disarm them. Most of those nations are in agreement with Trump on ending this conflict, and they, for the most part, agreed with Trump's peace plan.
I just don't understand why Hamas would give up the hostages and then say, but we're not going to give up our guns.
Well, keep in mind they also got hundreds of Palestinians back who were extremists. That reinforces their numbers. I've said many times these are people who are radical. Their whole identity is the destruction of Israel. If you can add to your numbers, they may believe they have a better chance at putting up a fight. Now, the interesting thing to me is the Democratic Socialists of America, which is the political party supporting New York City mayoral hopeful Zohran Mamdani, condemned the ceasefire, saying they did not believe Israel would honor any negotiated agreement and accused Israel of terrorizing the Palestinian people and other nations in the region. To me, that sounds like the war is good because of the way nations around the world are reacting to it. It was less about the people of Gaza and more about the destruction of Israel.
I'm still not sure how Mamdani or anyone can support Hamas at this point. Like, why are we supporting a group that wants to take out the people of Israel, so much so that they're willing to take hostages and they're trying to get everybody else to let them have their own piece of land, and so they can just run around and cause destruction everywhere? I'm still unclear why anyone is not on the side of Israel.
Well, those are the same people going to your No Kings protests and shouting Trump is destroying democracy while not supporting the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yeah, and that's what is the craziest thing about it to me. Like you said, it's the only democracy in that area, and all of the other areas around it are run by these radical groups that torture and rape and kill people and all kinds of stuff. Like, why are we supporting any of that?
Well, it's not every nation in the region. You know, the Saudis, the Qataris, Kuwait, Bahrain, they've had an incident or two that were bad over the years. Those nations kind of are relatively peaceful. They are not democracies. Most of them are monarchs led by a family, and most Middle Eastern nations are rich because of oil.
Well, while we're on this topic anyway, I wanted to ask if you had seen any of the footage from these hostages being released. I've seen a couple of them, and I gotta say it is very heartwarming, and I cannot imagine how, first of all, how the hostages who were released, how they feel seeing their family for the first time in 2 years, and how the families feel seeing their loved one finally come back to them and being reunited again. It's a very heartwarming story. Like most people, mad about how long this took to happen, but at the same time, it's been a long time coming, and we're glad that we're finally here.
Yeah, I've seen some of it, and I've read some of the stories, and some of them are heartbreaking. It's great that these people are reunited with their families. Unfortunately, the trauma that some of these individuals have gone through over the last 2 years is just brutal, and it's stuff that you don't forget about and you don't get over. They're doing well for what they've been through, but it's going to be years, if not decades, before some of these people recover. Some of the stories of what they went through are heartbreaking.
Yeah, a lot of them are probably scarred for life. They might not ever be the same.
We've had a topic about PTSD on this show before, and I could imagine many of them will live with this for the rest of their lives and will struggle with this. The other thing that surprises me is how many people in the legacy media are trying to take some of the credit from this peace deal and pass it off to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I really don't think they had anything to do with this. Biden and Harris had nearly 18 months to get something done in this conflict. They never did. I saw some people on NBC trying to say that Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken laid the groundwork for this. I do not buy that. Biden routinely pressured Israel to concede while hardly ever putting any pressure on Hamas, when it was Hamas that wanted to continue the war the most. Israel was in Gaza because their own population saw it as unacceptable to have their own citizens being held captive in a neighboring territory. Israel's main objective from the start was the return of their hostages.
Yeah, which I think is reasonable.
So I wanted to ask you, from what you saw in the news, how much of this do you think was Joe Biden's groundwork getting the deal done?
Yeah, like you said, they had a year and a half to get something done, and then Trump took over. Now this war is, I won't say officially over. I don't recall anyone in Israel saying anything about Joe Biden. Nobody said, hey, thanks to Joe Biden. All the credit was given to Donald Trump, and I think rightly so.
They were actually chanting Trump's name and suggesting he should get a Nobel Peace Prize. I do think he should get a Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know if he will because he's Trump, and you kind of love him or hate him, and most of the world is in the hate category.
Yeah, I think President Trump's time is coming for the Nobel Peace Prize. I do think that he will win it, especially if he can get the Russia-Ukraine stuff to be over with.
Now, we say all that with the assumption that this will be seen through and the peace deal will be completed. Again, dealing with terrorists, I'm still in the I'll believe it when I see it camp on this peace deal being completed, but it's a massive win for Trump and for Israel that the hostages have been released, at least the living ones. The torture is over, and they're reunited with their families. It's great to see that.
Yeah, definitely. Finally, like you said, the living hostages have been released. They're back with their families. Hopefully they can get some closure from all this. I do hope that any of them who may be suffering mentally get the help that they need, and they're surrounded by their loved ones, and they can turn the page on this. Obviously, they're never going to be able to forget it, but hopefully they can move on, and the rest of the world can move on, and we can avoid things like this in the future. So moving on to our next topic, we've spent quite a bit of time about Israel and the hostages and everything. So next we'll move on to government shutdown. So as we've seen, the layoffs have started.
Yes, according to the Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought, layoffs in the federal government have begun. Trump has vowed to make permanent spending cuts targeting Democrat programs first to give them a taste of their own medicine, in his words. Now, of course, everything Trump does is met with a lawsuit. So a judge in California San Francisco, to be specific, put in a temporary restraining order blocking these. Of course, there's many appeals that'll come. So while the Trump administration has begun laying people off, those people are still technically employed and will continue to be until these appeals are seen through. While all of that goes on, the political games from both sides continue. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer even went as far as to say that things get better for the Democratic Party every day that this continues on, but Trump stated he actually disagrees and said it's getting worse. We knew the political games would continue. I still don't see this ending anytime soon. There's a No Kings rally coming up Saturday, 3 days from when we're recording this. There is zero chance that Democrats will end the government shutdown before then because it would help the protests.
I have it on record. I said originally 28 days. Mike Johnson has come out and said that he believes this will be the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Now, whether or not we get to 28 days, I think the longest one was how many days, Matt?
I believe it was 23 during Trump's first term.
Okay, so we're on track. I mean, if Mike Johnson thinks that this is going to be the longest one in history, if we get to 24 days, even at 24 days, I'm only 4 days off, and that was calling it on, the first day of the shutdown? I think that this could drag out for a couple more weeks. We're officially 15 days in at this point, so...
You did say 28 days. I thought you were being a bit pessimistic at the time, but the more time passes, the more accurate your prediction looks.
I'm afraid at this point that I may have underestimated how long it'll be. Obviously, we didn't get a chance to talk about this on Sunday because we didn't record, but the day before that, Saturday, October 9th, President Trump directed Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to pay the troops during the government shutdown. Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, Chuck Schumer recently said every day gets better during their radical left shutdown. I disagree. If nothing is done because of Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, our brave troops will miss the paychecks they are rightfully due on October 15th. That is why I'm using my authority as Commander-in-Chief to direct our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to use all available funds to get our troops paid on October 15th. We have identified funds to do this, and Secretary Hegseth will use them to pay our troops. I will not allow the Democrats to hold our military and the entire security of our nation hostage with their dangerous government shutdown. The radical left Democrats should open the government, and then we can work together to address healthcare and many other things that they want to destroy. Trump has also called on those Democrats to vote for the House-passed bill to continue government funding through late November. Now, I personally love this from President Trump. I've said since the beginning that I do not like our troops or anyone else working without pay. I think it's a strong move from Trump, and most importantly, it's just the right thing to do.
Now, how do you feel about congressmen still getting paid? Because by law, senators and representatives in the House still get paid during a government shutdown. Republicans have vowed not to take the paycheck until the military got paid. How would you feel if the Democrats still took the paycheck?
I mean, I kind of look at this as like a union strike, right? Like if you work for a union and you go on strike, are you being paid to work? Nope, you're not being paid to work. So why are these Congress members who are not working being paid?
Well, technically they are working. In this case, it's the business that decided the union members are not going to work.
I think they're avoiding working. That's my take on it. They're avoiding the work so that they can try to point fingers at each other and play the blame game.
Well, that's fair. And that's politics, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you a little funny story, too. So I posted a clip on our TikTok from the last episode that we did about how I didn't like that the military wasn't getting paid. Somebody commented on that post saying that it was, quote, unpatriotic of Trump to not pay them. First of all, it's not Trump's fault, but that's not really the point of the story. Within 12 hours, I want to say, Trump posted that he instructed Hegseth to pay the troops. So, of course, I went back to the comments and responded to that person saying, well, it looks like Trump is paying them. So, kudos to him.
So even though Trump wasn't the one preventing them from getting paid, he is the one that's going to get them paid. I'm going to guess he won't get any credit for that, though.
Nope, probably not. And like we said before, Trump is going after these programs and laying these people off from these Democratic programs. What did Democrats think was going to happen? A, and B, don't you think they would do the exact same thing?
I'm sure some Democrats will try and take credit for what Pete Hegseth and Trump are doing to pay these members of the military. It seems to me like they live in some alternate reality. We've heard Kamala Harris running around in her book tour telling everybody that she lost one of the closest elections in history. Trump won every swing state, and all but 2 counties in the country shifted to the right. There are more Democrats in this country than Republicans, and that means those people either didn't come out to vote for Kamala or they switched sides. Trump won the popular vote. People had 4 years of Trump in office, and they compared it to the 4 years Biden and Harris were in power. And it was so bad, they decided we would go back to the bad orange man who tweets all day. Trump was even boasting about his election win a couple days ago, calling it one of the biggest landslides in history. And he accused the Democrats of lying about the results. I think he's right. I wouldn't call it the biggest landslide in history, and I wouldn't put it top 5, but it wasn't as close as Kamala's making this out to seem.
No, it was a landslide from the jump. I think that's part of the reason that she didn't come out and concede that night and she waited until the next day. I think her and everybody else were just shocked that they got run over.
Well, and they're holding out that last sliver of hope that we could find some more ballots and swing this around. I remember talking to our father the night of the election, right before the first polls closed, and he could not believe it when I told him I thought we would have a result on election night by 3 or 4 in the morning. And sure enough, we were getting most of the swing states called between, 11 p.m. and 2 or 3 a.m. North Carolina was called at something like 10 or 10:30, just 3 or 4 hours after polls closed. Pennsylvania was thought to be really, really close and is one of the slower states at counting. And even they had their results determined by the next morning. The votes just weren't there for Kamala Harris. If they want to keep lying to themselves and saying they were really close and that they can keep doing the same thing and that'll work next time, they're welcome to. I don't mind a J.D. Vance 2028 presidency.
Yeah, kind of going back to what you said before, I think a lot of people took the last 4 years of Biden and Harris and they compared it to Trump's first term. And I think a lot of people were like, you know what? I think my life was better from 2017 to the end of 2020. And most people were like, yeah, I'd much rather do that again. I think people's pockets were thicker. People had more money in their pocket. Their lives were just a lot better for those 4 years than they realized. It wasn't until we saw the train wreck that was Biden-Harris for the last 4 years that people were like, okay, I can't go through this again.
When everything you need to survive, like electricity and groceries, are way more expensive, you'll put up with a couple mean tweets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I could care less about what Donald Trump tweets or posts on Truth Social or whatever, just as long as the government leaves me alone and I can take care of my family.
I did enjoy some of the self-owning done by Biden and his team after Trump took office, though. Did you ever see the graph that Biden's team put out that was an inflation graph of the last 5 years? It started with a couple months left in Trump's term and it went to present day, and it was just a straight line upwards, only for Trump to come back in and point out that it was flat until Biden took office. Then it started to skyrocket.
I did see that graph. I love how they tried to take it down as fast as possible, too.
But you knew Trump was leaving that graph up for the rest of time.
Yep. Once you put it on the internet, somebody screenshots it, and it is there forever.
You got to know people are screen recording everything today.
So moving on from that, there was another story that broke since the last time we recorded. Letitia James has officially been indicted over mortgage fraud. She purchased a house with a loan that was specifically for her to live in the house. Instead, she rented the house out, lied to the bank, and in lying, saved herself a bunch of money. But as I keep saying, you better be prepared for the consequences of your actions.
Yeah, she listed this as a residence for her and her family. It could have been a secondary residence. She was Attorney General of New York, so she did have to live in New York. I just found it really funny that she went after Trump while committing fraud, and now some of the legacy media, including someone at NBC News, saying that this is no big deal because everyone does it. I was shocked to hear that. I didn't know everyone was out here committing fraud. You own a house. Did you lie to the bank to get your house?
No, and what shocks me the most is that she personally went after Donald Trump. So did she really not think that there would be some retribution? Like, why would you not make sure that you're squeaky clean from the day Trump got elected and she knew that he was about to be the 47th president of the United States? Why would you not make sure that you were squeaky clean? This is a case of picking a fight that you can't win, in my opinion. What's funny, too, is now she's standing in front of cameras saying that none of this is true and that Trump's just trying to get her, and she's, trying to play the victim card here.
Yeah, it's funny because she literally campaigned on going after Trump. That was the biggest promise of her campaign, was that she was going to prosecute Trump. Now that it's turned around on her, she's less than happy. The ironic part is there's more evidence that she committed a crime than he did. Now, he got convicted because it was in New York. He was always going to get convicted. That's my opinion. In the district that trial took place in, it was something like 95% Democrat, so the jury was kind of always going to be against him. That's kind of why we had never tried presidents before for crimes. It's virtually impossible to give them a fair trial. And I would counter that with the classified documents case he had in Florida. There was a 0% chance he was going to be convicted on that. That was a very friendly district for Donald Trump. Most of the people on the jury would have been supporters of his and voters of his. So there was no way he was going to get convicted in that case. Now, that one did get thrown out. But if it had gone to trial, he'd have been pretty safe in that one, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's really no way for him to get a fair trial one way or the other. Like you said, in a mostly Republican state, obviously, they're not going to convict him. In a mostly Democratic state, they're definitely going to convict him. You're not going to get 12 people on a jury that can be unbiased, especially in today's day and age, that all the hate everyone has for the Orange Man.
But it's been that way throughout history in this country. You're never going to get a fair trial for a president. There's too many people who follow the news and vote to get 12 people onto a jury who are completely unaware of who the president of the United States is. You're never going to get a completely fair trial for someone who ran for national office.
Well, we'll talk more about that when we get some more news about it. For now, I want to move on to Charlie Kirk. So on his 32nd birthday, Charlie Kirk was posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor a civilian can receive. To say that Charlie deserved this award is an understatement. Faith, family, and freedom was the mantra that he lived by. Those were his principles, and it was those principles that he instilled in others. It was great to see everyone come together to celebrate this and watch Erica receive this medal on Charlie's behalf. Trump also signed a proclamation declaring October 14th as a national day of remembrance for Charlie Kirk. I think this is awesome. I love every bit of this. As someone that was a huge fan of Charlie Kirk and his message, I think this is great. I thought it was also really nice. Think about how busy of a couple of days that President Trump had there over in the Middle East and stuff for him to make it back in order to do this. I think that kind of shows, how much Charlie meant to President Trump as well. What do you think about all this?
Well, I got a couple points on that. I'm going to start with Trump, though. People were saying Trump and Kirk weren't friends because a day or two after Charlie passed, Trump was taking questions from the media and answering questions, smiling, sometimes laughing. He's the president of the United States. Yes, his friend passed, but he's also the most important person in the world, and he's got to get on with life. If he sulked for days, the media would have ripped him saying he needed to get on with it. but because he didn't sulk and he just got on with it, they ripped him anyways. Now on Charlie, I think it's great to see. I know people called him all kinds of names. They called him a fascist and stuff like that. If Charlie was a fascist, they should have let him live on and hoped and prayed that he became the leader of the fascists because he was terrible at it.
Yeah, he wasn't a very good fascist, to say the least.
I don't know how many fascists stick a mic in their opponent's face. Most fascists just kill the opponent. He did a lot of good, in my opinion. He was trying to bring the country together, and it's something that a few radical people couldn't handle. He was willing to say some uncomfortable truths. He was one who felt like facts and statistics can't be racist or sexist or xenophobic or whatever phobia they come up with now. I think that's a good way to honor and remember Charlie, for him to have his own day.
Yeah, agreed 100%. Okay, so we're coming to the end again. I think we had a lot of fun last time we recorded with the blind ranking, so I'm going to throw another blind ranking at you again. Again, we're doing 5 U.S. political figures. You're going to rank them in order from 1 to 5 without knowing who comes next. I think I made it a little bit tougher on you this time, but I will tell you, I did not throw any super crazy people in here. So it's, like I said, it's 5 U.S. political figures.
Who do you consider super crazy? Is Zoran super crazy?
I don't think Zoran was super crazy. He was out there. I did throw you a curveball on that one. I don't have anybody on the list this time that I would call as crazy as that one.
Okay, but tougher, so but keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think a little bit tougher just because of the order I'm going to throw them at you this time.
Got it.
All right. So let's start off with the first person, Nancy Pelosi.
My instinct says go right down the middle. So I'm going to go 3.
Okay, 3. That is a hot start. I'll give you a hint. That is a hot start. You're on track. All right, so the next name, Jasmine Crockett.
Worse than Nancy. Is that a number 5, though? Ooh. She's pretty out there. I'm going to have to go number 5.
Okay, number 5 for Jasmine Crockett. All right, so our next person is George W. Bush.
Ooh. Better than Nancy, so 1 or 2. He did have some mistakes. He did get us into Afghanistan, which dragged on for 20 years. Overall, I would say pretty good, and I'm not sure there's going to be someone better, so I'm going to go 1.
Okay, we're going number 1 for George W. Bush. All right, you have number 4 and number 2 left. So next up, we have Joe Biden.
4.
That's an easy one. I mean,
can't be.
Yeah, you can't go over Nancy.
Well, Joe Biden's been on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision in his entire life. He's never been on the right side.
Yeah, true. All right, so you have the number 2 spot left. At number 2, you're going to have RFK Jr.
Yeah, I nailed that list again.
Yeah,
I am pretty good at this.
I think you did pretty good. You had George W. Bush at number 1, RFK Jr. at 2, Nancy Pelosi at 3, Joe Biden at 4, and Jasmine Crockett at 5. I think that's pretty good. I told you Nancy Pelosi right down the middle, I think, was the right call. That was the perfect way to start. If you start any other way with her, I think you're going to back yourself into a corner.
Now, 2 to 3 isn't a massive gap. RFK Jr. is kind of out there with some of these opinions he has on medicine. I don't actually think there's a ton of evidence or data to back up what he says, but overall, better than Nancy. He's willing to talk to anybody. He was a Democrat. He was running for president as Democrat, so I feel like that's a pretty good list.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Now, speaking of out there, did you see Obama's new presidential library? When I first saw the image, I thought it was like a new CIA torture site in Chicago, but I've seen people like Senator Ted Cruz say it's an interesting choice to put the Death Star in Chicago.
So I'm looking at the photo of it now, and I gotta say, it does not look like a library, that's for sure. I don't know, that building looks like it should be at the beginning of a scary movie. Or at the very least, that's the Joker's headquarters from The Dark Knight.
It could also be the cat litter genie. Let me show you that picture.
Yeah, it does look like a litter box. It is a self-cleaning litter box, so maybe Obama should spend a little more time in there.
You'd have thought a library would be a little warmer and welcoming in a place that looked like you were coming to learn.
There's just a bunch of unnecessary spaces on the outside of this building. Like, you can't tell if it's a window or if it's like offices. I don't know. I need to see a closer up image of this place, but from the photo from afar, it is a weird looking place, that's for sure.
Well, if you didn't have the openings on the right side of that image on the building, would it not look exactly like the CIA building in New York? Just a smaller version of it?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, we've been going for a while. That's the end of this episode of the Republic Brothers podcast. Here's our recap. The hostages have officially been returned to their families. Trump begins attempting layoffs during the government shutdown. And October 14th is now an official day of remembrance for Charlie Kirk. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to follow the Republic Brothers podcast on Facebook, Instagram, X, Truth Social, and TikTok. Leave us a rating and share this episode with a friend. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.